Alrighty guys, so for today's video, I'm going to be taking this metal ring, building a smokeless fire pit. Around the metal ring will be a concrete fire pit, capped off on top with some nice stones. There will be a channel between the concrete pit and the metal ring that will allow cold air to come in, travel up the channel, and go through the ring into the fire to create a smokeless pit. Stay tuned.
Alrighty, so to get started here, we're just digging out about 3 to 4 inches down into the ground. I don't plan on putting the pit too much below the ground because the ring itself is only about a foot tall. So I'm only going a couple inches down, but I'm going to backfill that in with gravel once everything is in place. You can see I've got my little helper here today helping me out. This is Diesel, our new puppy. For this project, I'm using a fire ring from the Tractor Supply. It is about 60 bucks and it's 36 inches in diameter. And you know, as puppies typically do, they have a problem with digging. So in hindsight, I probably shouldn't have been doing all this digging while Diesel was around, but I did, and you know, now he thinks he's allowed to dig up the backyard as well. So that's great. Alrighty, so all I'm doing here is basically just getting the ring level. Not extremely important for what I'm doing. I just wanted it to be roughly level. And that's just so I can nail down those stakes right up against the ring. There's a couple ways to approach a concrete pour like this. You could take the time to, you know, cut a circle into a piece of plywood and build a really nice form, and then level that form up and get it nice and level. Or alternatively, you could do what I did, which was basically just rough it out. So as you'll see later on in the process, the ring itself is not perfectly circular. There are some fat areas and there are some thin areas, but overall it worked out pretty well, just kind of roughing it out like this. And to be honest, you can't even really tell that it was as rough as it looks. So for the inner portion of the ring, I started off by just pin nailing the plywood that I got there. It's 1/8 inch plywood with a nice glossy finish on one side, which will be the concrete side. And all I'm doing is just pin nailing it to the stakes that I drove in the ground. And realistically, I should have actually created the ring first. Here you see me kind of marking it and then cutting it. That didn't really give me the best results. As you'll see on the second ring, I do actually form the ring before I put it in place. Additionally, by not forming the ring first, it left some very angular gaps in between where the two pieces of form match. So here you can see I'm drilling a few holes through the inner ring. This is going to allow the cold air to come in through the bottom of the concrete and then go up the channel between the concrete and the aluminum, or steel rather. So now that I know my rough outer diameter, I calculated the circumference of that, and then I made a piece by just attaching a stake to the outside, upside down. And I attached the ring on one end, and then I went ahead and brought it together on the other side, used the tree as a support, and did the same thing on the other side, attached that side of the ring. So now we have two very good connections on opposing sides. And then I just kind of like you would with a you know, set of lug nuts on a wheel, I kind of went back and forth opposing sides and got it kind of roughly where I wanted it. I think I used about 3 packs of stakes for this project here. And there you have it. I have all of the stakes in the ground. The forms are all in place. I'm just nailing in a couple extra nails just to hold the form in place against the stake. And on to the next portion.
Alrighty, y'all. What you just saw me do was create the form for the concrete pour. Now you'll notice the inner ring, I just kind of roughly made a circle around the metal, trying to keep a rough gap. The outer ring, I preformed first with the calculation of roughly 6 inches in thickness. Made it into a disc, and then I roughly centered it before putting it in place properly. You can see on the inside, I used the smooth material for a nice finish on the concrete. And you'll also notice that I put a few nails in occasionally around the outside. It's been about an hour and a half to do all of this. Now all that's left is to put the rebar in place and then prepare for concrete.
So I started off with an 8-foot section of, I believe it's 3/8 rebar, and all I'm doing is cutting off 10-inch sections of rebar. I'm no professional here, but my intention was to essentially just drive the rebar down like an inch. Given that the concrete was 12 inches high, I didn't want the rebar to be too close to the top. However, my ground was actually a lot softer than I thought it would be, so I drove the rebar down about halfway. So I've got about 5 inches in the ground, 5 inches up. Luckily, I've got the steel mesh, which is just at about 10 inches as well. So I cut off to where one end has a bunch of spikes sticking out of it, and I shoved that end into the ground and kind of intertwined it in the rebar so it'll kind of, hold on to the rebar. Then, just to make sure I didn't have any leaks, I went around both on the inside of the inner circle and the outside of the outer circle, and I filled in any air gaps that I could see with sand. Now here I'm just checking the level just to see if it's level. Again, it doesn't really matter to me because the way I'm going to pour it, I'm just going to pour it until it overflows and let the concrete level itself.
Alrighty guys, as you can see, the final form is complete. We've got the steel inside, we've got the holes plugged, and we've got the sides up. One other thing to notice, I've got these PVC pipes you can see all the way around, 4 to be exact. And what those are going to do is allow the cold air to be sucked into that channel in between the concrete and the steel pit, which will then rise up the side and then escape into the pit to reignite the smoke on the way out. So yep, there it is. Next video you'll see me mixing up the concrete and pouring it in, followed up by finishing up the top of the form.
So that's it for part 1. Go ahead and stay tuned for part 2, where we're pouring the concrete and finishing off the top. And if you will, subscribe and like this video. Thank you.